If you've ever seen a world map, you likely have noticed that the Korean Peninsula in Eastern Asia is divided between the ironically named Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or North Korea, and roughly south of the 38th parallel that divides them, the Republic of Korea, or South Korea. Despite united by a common identity and language, which by the way is the world's most spoken language isolate, the ethnic Korean people are divided by the most heavily fortified and perhaps most impassable land border in the world, the Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ. The 4-kilometre wide zone hosts hundreds of thousands of soldiers, tanks and artillery, and contains the Joint Security Area, where soldiers of each nation literally stare each other down, and is one of the most tense geopolitical divides in the world. But Korea was not always divided. The area was first unified as a single Korean state in 936 AD, when the kingdom of Goryeo finally conquered the peninsula, ending the Three Kingdoms period. Goryeo is where we get our modern name Korea from. Korean unity continued for 1,000 years, first as Joseon and finally between 1897 and 1910 the Korean Empire. This millennium-long unity wasn't exactly stable, with the successive Korean states coming under persistent attack from the Mongols and the Yuan Chinese. But despite brief periods of non-sovereignty, the 1,000-year-long existence was mostly of a self-governing Korean state. But this came to its end in the early 20th century, when the Korean Peninsula's proximity to colonial powers made it a natural target of colonisation, and in 1910 was annexed into the brutally expanding Empire of Japan. Korea would remain under Japanese rule for 35 years. Deprived of sovereignty and self-governance, Korean culture and language was discouraged, and inhumane brutality inflicted on the ethnic Koreans. Although a major Japanese territory, the peninsula's geographical area protected it largely from Allied attacks during the Second World War, but after the American nuclear attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan was forced into an unconditional surrender. A few months earlier, the Allies had made the Potsdam Declaration, which among other conditions, demanded that Japan surrendered all its territories beyond the main Japanese archipelago. So, in the aftermath of the surrender in September 1945, the Empire of Japan was dismantled, and an agreement was reached for the Soviet Union and the United States of America to temporarily administer the north and south of the Korean Peninsula respectively. The divide was made along the 38th parallel, with both of the New World superpowers agreeing to work toward a unification. However, with the rising tensions of the Cold War and the polarization of political ideologies between the capitalist United States of America and the communist USSR, the divisions grew, and the Soviet Union backed Kim Il-sung to take power in the north, and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea was born, while democratic elections in the south elected Syngman Rhee as the first president of the Republic of Korea. The division of the peninsula following a millennium of unity was made permanent by the Korean War, which started in 1950 when communist North Korean forces, financially backed by the Soviet Union, crossed the 38th parallel to invade the south. Initially, the north appeared to be on the verge of victory, with the south's forces and its allies cornered at the Busan perimeter in the southeast of the peninsula. However, a major counter-offensive completely turned the tide, and the UN-backed South pushed the North back to the border with China. Concerned that a South Korean victory would lead to US military personnel stationed at their border, and the ideological threat of a capitalist democracy, China reinforced the depleted North and pushed the UN forces back to the 38th parallel. After 3 years and over 1 million dead, the two sides signed an armistice, and the border was re-established almost unchanged from its pre-war position. As the armistice was not a peace treaty, the two Koreas still remain legally at war. Bankrolled by Stalinist Russia and Maoist China, the North began a remarkable feat of reconstruction, and outperformed the South's economy until the 1970s. But with the collapse of the Soviet Union and a subsequent famine in the early 90s, the North Korean economy fell apart, and today the North trails far behind South Korea in economic and social prosperity. So why is Korea still divided despite the collapse of the Soviet Union, and although steadily declining, support in the South for reunification remains a majority? The problem is that the political differences are overwhelming. North Korea is a state-controlled economy run by a totalitarian dictator, while South Korea is a free market democracy. While the North's provocations are unhelpful, the main issue is the cost of reunification, with many estimates suggesting it to be between 2 to 3 trillion US dollars. Advocates point to the successful reunification of East and West Germany, but while the Kim regime refuses to release its grasp of power, the Korean people must, for now, remain divided.